So, you've picked out your wall general. That's great. But now, you need some assistance picking out your assistant. And that's what we're going to try and help you with here. Hi, and welcome to Red Evony. I am Akayasha. You can call me Aka. And this is everything you need to know about picking your wall assistant. Wall generals are actually the easiest type of generals to pick assistants for, because they are compatible with a wide range of generals in the game. However, though, therein lies the problem, in that we are literally spoiled for choice for the types of generals that we can pick from. And so it might be a bit difficult to zero in on the specific general that would be best for you to use as an assistant. What we're going to do here, we're going to give some guidance to help you narrow down the choices so you can land on the right assistant for you. Now, when you were picking your wall general, you most likely decided on the type of defensive strategy that you want to go with, be that a balanced strategy or a specialized strategy. And your assistant wall general is also going to play into that strategy that you've decided on. When it comes to assistant generals, there are basically two main things that you want them to do. You want them to either boost the stats of your main wall general, or you want them to plug up the gaps that your main wall general has. And to help illustrate that, I'm going to use my wall general as an example. As you can see here, I have Dewey as my main wall general. Now, what are Dewey's strengths? Dewey is very good for buffing ranged troops and siege troops. And he also provides some buffs for mounted troops. So, if we're going down the path of boosting our main wall general, we'll want an assistant that either buffs ranged troops or siege troops. So, in that light, having an assistant wall general like Leo III would actually boost the strengths of my main wall general. Leo III will provide buffs for siege troops, which falls in line with what I'm doing with Dewey. That's an example of boosting your main wall general. If we're looking at the option of plugging up the gaps, then we need to look at Dewey's weaknesses. For Dewey, he provides very little buffs for ground troops. So, in that light, having an assistant general like Leonidas will help plug up the gaps that my Dewey has. Those are examples of the two main options that we can take when it comes to picking an assistant wall general. You will have to know the strengths and the weaknesses of the main wall general that you're using, and then pick your assistant accordingly, depending on which of the two options that you want to go with, whether boosting the main general or plugging up the gaps. Now, with that being said, it can happen that even with those two options, you still haven't found a general that you are very satisfied with. In that case, there is fortunately a third option that we can use when we're trying to pick an assistant wall general. And that option is to pick a debuff general to use as our assistant. A lot of debuff generals in the game would actually qualify to be used as assistant wall generals. And if you cannot pick an assistant wall general based on the first two options that we gave, then this is a very viable and natural option for you to go with. If you decide to go with a debuff general as your assistant wall general, naturally you'd expect that the debuffs that that general has will be applied to your defense, which is great. But there's also an interesting point to note with debuff generals. Let's, for example, say that we have Andrew Jackson as our assistant wall general. Andrew Jackson provides debuffs to range attack and mounted HP. Those debuffs will be applied to our defense. But in addition to that, if you were to do the specialties on Andrew Jackson, his specialties will actually apply on defense. Let's look at his first specialty here. It has range attack and range HP. If you did his specialties, these stats will apply on your defense. And this is the case for most of the specialties on debuff generals. However, though, you need to be careful when you're looking at the specialties, because specialties that specifically require the general to be in a sub-city will not apply if you use them as assistant world generals. In addition, if we take a look at Andrew Jackson's third specialty here, which says enemy wounded into death when attacking, this specialty will not apply if you're using him as an assistant world general. If we look at his fourth specialty, enemy range troop attack debuff, that will apply. But the next one, which says death turning wounded rate when attacking, will not apply. So when you're picking these generals, you need to pay attention to what their specialty actually says. Other than that, most of the debuff generals are very viable choices to use as assistant world generals. So those are the main options that we have when we're deciding what kind of assistant world general to narrow down to. With that said though, it's important to note that there is also the potential of you using multiple assistant world generals, depending on the situation that you're in. Let me use myself as an example. When the assistant general system was introduced, I started off using Wei Quinn as my assistant world general. And that was because I wanted the ground attack debuffs that Wei Quinn provides. As time went on and my game developed a bit, the requirements I wanted for my assistant world general changed. So right now, I don't use Wei Quinn as my assistant world general. Right now, I have Leo III as my assistant. And that's all perfectly fine. As time goes on and my game continues to evolve, there is still the possibility that I might switch Leo out for a different assistant world general. Maybe that might happen sometime in the near future. Unlike with your world general, you are not completely locked into the assistants that you use. You can use multiple assistants and switch them out depending on the time frame and how your game evolves over that period of time. So, do not have the mindset of picking one assistant general and you're locked in and that's it. Okay? Assistant generals are much easier to switch out than your main world general. Now, with that being said, I would like us to pay some caution when it comes to doing the specialties on our assistant world generals. As you very well know, doing specialties on a general is not easy and it's not cheap. So, before you start doing the specialties on your assistant world general, it would be great for you to be very happy and confident with the assistant general choice that you have right now. Once you're satisfied with the general, then you can go ahead and start doing the specialties. Okay, now that we've gone through all of that, let's actually go through some potential examples for assistant world generals. And since Dewey is my main world general, the examples I'll be using will be focusing around him. But you can do exactly the same depending on the world general that you're using. But before we go into the discussion of assistant options, one thing that you really need to keep in mind when looking at assistants for your world general is compatibility and availability. For example, I can't say that because I got William Marshall, I can use him as my war assistant. As you can see, William Marshall and Dewey are not compatible. Even though, as I said earlier, world generals are compatible with a lot of generals, they are not compatible with all. So you need to check and make sure that whatever assistant options you're looking at are actually compatible with your main general. And then, of course, there's availability. Okay? You cannot use an assistant world general that you do not have. It's not possible. So you need to work with what you have, or at the point in time where you can get a new assistant general, then you can consider that option. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at options for assistants based on the 4 troop types. And of course, since there are many options available, we can't go through all of them in this video. So I'm going to give some recommendations for my top 2 picks and also some recommendations for free-to-play options. And you can use those as guides when you're also picking out your assistant general. Okay, so for ground troops, the 2 best options that I would give for assistant world generals would be Leonidas and Lautaro. In my opinion, these are the 2 best choices that we have. Now, a common dilemma that some people have talked to me about is, which of these 2 should I pick? If you want the option for the highest stats that you can get for ground troops, go with Leonidas. Of the 2, Leonidas has the higher ground stats. He also gives some little extra buffs for mounted troops and for ranged troops. Lautaro, on the other hand, even though his ground buffs are less than Leonidas, he still has very decent ground buffs. And in addition to that, he also provides buffs for mounted troops. So, if you're in a situation where, let's say, you want to buff both your ground troops and your mounted troops, as we see with some players that have both the T1 mounted troops and the T1 ground troops, then Lautaro would be the general for you to go with. So, those are the 2 best picks for ground. Aside from these guys, other viable options that we have Oda Oichi. She is also a decent option to use as an assistant world general that will buff your ground troops. Of course, she's a premium general. Not everyone has her, but if you do and you don't have the other options that we talked about, she would work fine. Now, for free-to-play options, in my opinion, the best option that we have for a free-to-play general that you can use to boost ground troops as your assistant is Robert the Bruce. In my opinion, Robert the Bruce is probably not the greatest general to use as your main world general, but as an assistant, he's pretty decent. And he's free to play. He'll provide decent ground buffs for your defense. So, if you don't have any of the premium options that we've talked about, you can pick up Robert the Bruce and he will work perfectly fine. Okay, let's talk about siege troops. If we're looking for a general to buff siege troops, in my opinion, the 2 best options that we have are Leo III and Edward Teach. Yes, I know Takenaka is an option as well, but compared to these 2, he is nowhere near being widely available to all players, which is why we're putting him aside for now. So, if you want to buff siege troops, go with an assistant of either Leo III or Edward Teach. If you don't have either of those generals and you want a free-to-play option that you can use to buff siege troops on your defense, I would recommend going with Tran. Tran is an oldie in Evony. With all the generals that we have right now, he's probably not the greatest world general for you to use as a main, but as a free-to-play general and an assistant, he is pretty decent. He has decent siege stats, which will help boost your defense. So, if you don't have any of the premium options that we've talked about, you can go and pick yourself up Tran, and he will boost your siege stats pretty well. Next, we're going to talk about ranged troops. And in my opinion, if you want to buff ranged troops with your assistant world general, the best general for you to pick, hands down, is Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor is available in the relics, so he is widely available to most players. And if you want to buff ranged troops on your defense, this is the guy to go with. There are other options available. Someone like Kusunoki Masashige is a viable option if you want to buff ranged troops with your assistant world general. And there are some other ranged generals available that you could potentially use as assistant world generals. So that's it for buffing ranged troops. If you want to buff mounted troops with your assistant world general, in my opinion, the best options for you to go with are Queen Boudica and Naomasa. Boudica is available in the Tavern and in the Relics. Naomasa is available in the Relics, so they are both easily accessible to all players in the game. Of course, if for some reason you can't get either of these two, then other possible options are Jadwiga or Honda. Those two would work as options, but I don't think there'll be any problem with anyone getting either Boudica or Naomasa, so those are the two ones that you should go with. Now, when it comes to debuff generals, there are a wide range of generals for you to pick from. The main thing that you need to decide on is what kind of troops am I trying to debuff? Once you've decided on that, you can pick from the roster of debuff generals that we have. So, potential options that you could look at Andrew Jackson, you could look at Baldwin, you could look at Nero, Mark Antony, Wei Quinn, practically any debuff general that you can think of. One important thing for you to pay attention to if you are picking a debuff general is that if you have multiple choices for the same troop type that you're trying to debuff, then the important thing for you to do is to look at their other specialties. Because as I said, the other specialties of the debuff generals will apply if you do them. So, for example, if you have two generals that are debuffing, let's say ranged troops, and you can't pick between the two of them, look at their other specialties and decide which of those specialties will be better for your defense. Then that is the debuff general for you to go with. So that should significantly help you narrow down the search for your assistant world general. If you're still having issues picking out assistants for your other generals, then you can check out this video here, which will tell you what to focus on to help you narrow down your search for your assistant world general. I hope you found that helpful, guys. Thank you very much. Aka signing out.